Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور وأنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ما يهده الله فلا مضل له وما يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. In the contemporary Muslim world, we can see this contemporary Muslim world, it has been characterized by, you can say, different kinds of disunities, disorders, oppressions, and backwardness. And at present we can see that the Muslim countries, they are not in any leading position. We are not leading in the field of science, arts or commerce, or even we don't bother about our deen itself. And we can see that our Muslim world in the present day, it is dominated in all the fields by the non-Muslim countries in the West, by the non-Muslim countries in the West, and also the non-Muslim countries in the East. But what is the reason of this kind of backwardness? The different scholars actually, they are working on this to identify this problem, and from their findings we can see that mostly that we have already, we can say that we have given up the Arabic language as a means of understanding the Quran and also the Deen. And at the same time we have been influenced by the Western cultures, and we have adopted the Western cultures, the foreign cultures. And at the same time, with the advent of the 19th century, we can see the rise of the nationalism. This rise of nationalism, it has been widespread in the Western culture, and as well as they also tries to infuse into the Muslim cultures that idea of nationalism. So today, I'm going to talk about this idea of nationalism, its causes and effects, and whether it is permissible by the Quran and Sunnah. Now, before I go through the whole thing, I would like to focus on some points. And psychologists, sociologists, they actually identified these cases, that what put the human beings and what actually made them to stick together, and what are the basis of those reasons. Now, the first thing that we can see, that is patriotism. That means our love for a specific land, a piece of land. And we can see that patriotism actually, it works temporarily, and it can motivate people temporarily. How? You can see when your country is threatened by the external military forces, you can see that all the people together, irrespective of their caste and creed, they will come together to protect the sovereignty of their particular country. But when the situation is over, when the external threat, it is mitigated or pacified, you can see that people, they no longer stick together on the basis of this patriotism. They forget everything and they act as like before. So you can see, only in the situation when there is a kind of crisis, people stick together on the basis of this patriotism. So you can see the bond based on the patriotism is completely, it's a kind of temporary thing. Now the second issue is nationalism. Nationalism actually started with the family. You can see that one particular person in the family, he is the authority and he tries to have some dominion over his family, and when this dominion is done inside the family, then he will try to extend to the wider family, like in other families. And when he has extended his dominion or his authority over the extended families, then he will try to extend his authority over the whole community. And when it is done on the community, then he will try to extend on the other tribes, other groups. And as a result of this, we can see the rise of nationalism. So he will try to have his authority over the whole nation. Again, you can see this nationalism only works temporarily because it creates a kind of vacuum, and that is the conflict or the struggle for the leadership. Because who is going to be the leader? So in the family, we can see the conflict. Even in the community and even in the nation, we can see the conflict there. Some people, they want to be the leaders. So no one is going to, you can say, accept the leadership of the other people. So there is a conflict of the leadership in the nationalism. At the same time, there is another danger, and that is racism. Nationalism actually, it creates or it gives birth to racism. Different races, they think that we are the best or we are superior to the other races within the one nation. So because of these also, we can see that nationalism cannot ensure a permanent kind of bondage. Then the next one is spiritual bond, and this is based on religions. Spiritual bond, bond based on religion, actually, it doesn't, most of the cases, except the Muslim religion, you can see that it doesn't cover all the aspects of your life. So as a result, spiritual bond is at one point, it cannot give you the solutions for your life, for the purpose of life, or everything. So at one point, you stop believing in that kind of spiritual bondage. So it cannot give you any permanent solution. The next bondage is bond of interest. We can see different kinds of bond of interest, different kinds of community groups, or you can say the labor organizations. So they work for the different labor organizations, they work for the rights of the different labors or different labor society. But when the particular issue is over and when the demand is over, then what happens that the people who are working for that particular issue, they no longer feel any kind of affinity among themselves because the situation is over, so the bond of interest is also over. Then the last one is ideological bond. Ideological bond, actually, it's a kind of creed. We can say faith. In Arabic, we can say aqidah. This is the bond that actually we are looking for. And this bond, based on aqidah, is the permanent one. Because based on, if you just look at the situation before the pre-Islamic time, you can see that in the Arab Peninsula, most of the tribes, they were the pagans. And they were divided into different kinds of tribes. And they didn't have that kind of understanding, good understanding among themselves. And with some kind of little interest, they will start different kinds of skirmishes or wars. I can give you one example like this. There is a war that is called Harb al-Basus. Harb al-Basus, actually, it happened, the reason behind this war was, it is about the pre-Islamic time that I'm talking about. This Harb al-Basus, the Basus was a name of a camel, a she-camel. And this she-camel belonged to an old lady, an old woman from Banu Bakr. And what happened, that another tribe, some people from that tribe, actually, they owned it, that she-camel. And then, because of this she-camel, this wounded she-camel, these tribes, they started a kind of conflict. And later on, they started war. And this war lasted for 30 years. You see, it's a very trifling matter. But they started this war because it was based on the idea of tribes. And their society was based on the tribalistic structure. It was a matter of pride, honor, and glory of your tribe. So in any way, you have to protect it. And because of that, they were having different kinds of conflicts based on this tribalistic structure. Now, the thing is that I'm talking about, that when Islam came and people took the Shahada and accepted the Kalima, what happened? That they become one ummah, that ummatan wahida. And because of this, they stopped fighting, this kind of infighting, and also the inter-tribal wars, it stopped completely. Why? Because of the creed. They had the one faith, and that is Islam, and they believed in only one God. So you can see that the bondage or the bond based on the spiritual, based on this ideological ground is permanent than any other thing. Now, I've already talked about that, how actually Islam eradicated this nationalism. Now, I'd like to focus on some ayah or some verses from the Holy Quran. It's from Surah Bayana, verse number 5. It says, "And they have been commanded no more than this, to worship Allah, offering him sincere devotion, being true in faith, to establish regular prayer and to practice zakat. And this is the deen, right and straight. So you can see there is no place for nationalism. So it's talking about that how actually we have to perform the deen. It's suggesting us, these are suggesting us different kinds of practices that we have to do every day. Then in another ayah, Surah Tawbah, verse from 23 to 24, it says, O you who believe, take not for protectors your fathers and your brothers, if they love kufr above iman. If any of you do so, they do wrong. Say, if it be that your fathers, your sons, your brothers, your friends, your relatives, the wealth that you have gained, the commerce in which you fear decline, or the dwelling which you delight, are dearer to you than Allah or His Messenger, or the jihad in His cause, then wait until Allah brings about His decision, and Allah guides not the wrongdoers. So you can see here all the good qualities that actually we should have in our practical life and social life, in our family life. It has been suggested here in this ayah. And we have been asked, you see, if they love kufr above iman. So here you see iman, or faith, the creed. It has been emphasized here in this ayah. So we have to stick together on the basis of this creed of faith, or we can say iman, not on the basis of nationalism. I can quote another verse from the Holy Quran. It's from the Surah Anbiya, verse 92. It says, Allah says, Inna hadhihi ummatakum ummatan wahidan wa ana rabbakum fa'budun. Translation goes, this community of yours is one community, and I am your Lord, so worship me. So here you can see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, very much categorically and specifically, He mentioned in the Quran that ummatan wahidan. Now, I would like to mention that what kuffar or non-believers actually they have done to our deen, and how actually they tried to destroy our deen. It started actually from at the very beginning, or with the advent of the Islam, or the very early days of Islam. They tried to destroy the deen, that means our Islam, consequently our Iman. And we can see that these polytheist Quraysh, they also, who didn't believe in the Prophet Muhammad and also the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the only one God. The other Quraysh who were polytheists, they tried to stop Prophet Muhammad and his mission to implement the perfect deen, which was suggested or dictated by the Almighty Allah. And we can see some wars happened. One is 624, the Badr, and also the Battle of Uhud, which happened in 625. And you can see lots of examples in the subsequent centuries that it happened. It's not only with the other Arab tribes, also with the other nations. Like you can see the mighty Persian, the Roman empires, all these empires, they challenged this mission of the deen, which was propagated by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these Christians actually, they tried to stop this rise of Islam. I can mention one interesting fact here. You can see the Pope Abha II, he was the Pope at that time, and it was in 1095. There was a Council of Clermont, and they had a kind of, you can see a kind of discussion, a kind of, you can say conference in France at that time, and they call it Council of Clermont. And in the Council of Clermont, this Pope Abha II, he urged all the Christians to start the first crusades, and it started right after that in 1095. And interestingly, you can see, and which was really unfortunate for the Muslim Ummah, these crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099. So right after 4 or 5 years actually, the Jerusalem was captured by these Christian people, and they established a Christian kingdom at that place in Jerusalem. But alhamdulillah, you can see under the command of Salahuddin Ayyubi in 1187, actually this Jerusalem, it was retaken or recaptured by the Muslims, and finally the Crusaders were defeated at that time. Later on, you can see in the modern time, you can see the Russians and also other countries, they try to destroy these Muslim Ummah in different ways, and they try to break up all these Muslim countries in different small countries. And we can say they were quite successful in doing so. I would like to mention one thing here which is very important. There is one Khalid bin Walid who was given the title Saifullah, or you can say the sword of Allah. He said to his opponent in a battle, he said that these people with me love death the way you love life. And frankly speaking, this was enough to terrify the opponents, because Muslims actually, they fight for the deen, to protect the deen or iman. So that's why they are not scared of death. They prefer death than life if they feel threatened that their deen is under threat. Now, how? You can see in the first centuries, these Christian people, all the non-believers, along with the Jews, they tried to destroy the Muslims by military force. But they found that Muslims, actually they were militarily, they were undefeatable. They cannot be defeated. So they had a different plan. So they started these missionaries, Christian missionaries. They started sending these Christian missionaries in different Muslim countries. I can mention here one interesting fact. Here you can see the only one Jewish prime minister, his name was Benjamin Disraeli. Benjamin Disraeli, actually he was elected twice as the prime minister of UK, or you can say Britain. And once he held a copy of the Quran in the House of Commons, and he showed it to the other members of the House of Commons, and he said that Muslims can never be defeated until this is taken from them, pointing to the Quran. Actually, what he meant that if we can take away the understanding of the Islam or the deen from the Muslim, that means the Quran symbolically, then in that case Muslims can be defeated. He was a very shrewd politician. He was also a novelist, a writer, and he was a very good orator, this Benjamin Disraeli. So you can see, they started this conspiracy long before, just to destroy the deen of the Muslim. Now, these missionaries, actually, they had two objectives in their mind, and especially British, French and American agents, they are working to implement these Christian missionaries, and their main objectives were to distance the Muslims from the correct understanding of Islam by inserting doubt and conjecture into the minds of the Muslims regarding their aqeedah. So they will infuse into your mind some kind of doubt about your deen. So that was their sole purpose. The second one, to create a rift between the Turks, the Persians and the Arabs. This was in the form of the poisonous seed of nationalism. So they started this nationalism from that time. So the missionaries, actually, it was not to preach only the Christian religion, but to destroy the Islam, and through injecting into the minds of the Muslims the doubt about our deen. Now, I would like to mention some facts about these Christian missionaries. You can see they started these Christian missionaries' activities right before the Industrial Revolution that happened, that occurred in England and also some parts of the other European countries. And you can see in the 18th century they started this mission, and in the 16th century in Malta, first actually they established this, you can say, huge missionary center in Malta. It's a small European country. And then in 1625, they moved their center from Malta to Al-Sham. Al-Sham actually is Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon, mostly this part of these, Arab countries. And then they tried to promote these ideas of nationalism and other Western cultures, but they failed. So after a short period of time, then they shifted, or they moved their center from Al-Sham to Malta. So it started from Malta, they shifted it to Al-Sham, but it didn't work, so again they shifted it from Al-Sham to Malta in 1773. Now, they kept trying, and in 1820, again this missionary, they established their center in Beirut. And this time actually, they were quite successful. And they established schools, different missionaries, clinics, colleges, and later on you can see at the end of the 19th century they also established universities in Lebanon. And through these kind of activities, they penetrated to the whole few Muslim societies or communities that were there in Al-Sham. And by 1834, almost their mission was completed at the time. Now, some interesting fact, I have to say that why actually they were successful doing this kind of stuff, because at that time, those Muslim countries, or especially the Islamic State that we call, or the Uthmaniya Khilafah, it was under pressure from the other European countries, and they were pressurized by the European countries to change their system in the government and also the education system. And some Muslims, they were very much westernized and inspired by the Western ideas and Western philosophies, Western cultures, that they started changing their total education system and cultural norms. One of them was Ibrahim Pasha from Syria. He first started changing the primary school syllabuses. He changed the whole syllabus, and it was taken from the French libertine system. This French libertine system, it was also followed by the Egyptian education system. So you can see that in the Egypt and also in the Syria, now they have already implemented this education system influenced by the Western cultures. Now these missionaries, they found a kind of opportunity to actually mold, or you can see to reshape the mentality of the European, the Muslim people, because now they have got some access. They have got some, you can say, concomitants, like Ibrahim Pasha and other people, who gave them some chances to enter into the fabric of the Muslim society. Now, these missionaries actually, they didn't stop there. Now, they started, their first activity was to infuse into the mind of the people the Western cultures and to establish the Western education system. Now they have started creating some kind of civil strife or civil agitation. And they created lots of problems. And at that time, French, America, and also Britain, they started interfere into the internal affairs of the Muslim countries, or Muslim state, or the Islamic state, Uthmaniya Khilafah. And in this way, they created a huge problem for the whole Khilafah. And we can see that the Islamic State at that time, it was compelled to change the governing system of that Al-Sham. That means the Syria and Lebanon. And Syria and Lebanon, it was divided into two different provinces, or two different states. And Lebanon particularly, it was given, or you can say the European countries, especially French and UK, Britain, they were given a special kind of preferences and rights to interfere into the internal affairs of Lebanon. And you will find it very interesting that at that time, though it was a Muslim majority province or state, but it was governed by a local administration. It was headed by a Christian ruler. You can also see in present days in the Lebanon that maybe or the president or the prime minister, I'm not sure about it, but one of them, constitutionally must be a Christian. So in this way, they changed the whole system and they changed the whole Khilafah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Now, in my first part of the khutbah, I told you that what are their missions, and now these missionaries, they have started for us, showing the seeds of nationalism into the minds of these Muslims. Now, what happened? They started establishing different kinds of associations. It was a very clever strategy, because when you have small pockets or small associations, with those associations actually you can influence the people. If not possible all the people, but you can influence some people, and you can target a specific group or interest group. Now, You can see the American mission, they established Association of Arts and Science. It was established in Syria. And this Association of Arts and Science, it was first of its kind, and it was established in the mid-19th century, and it promoted Western culture. Then later on, this Association of Arts and Science actually didn't work in that way. Then again, when it failed, then the French missionary, they established Oriental Association. And the purpose or objectives or goals of all these associations were the same, just to promote the Western culture and the education. Later on, this Oriental Association, it worked for only a short period of time, mostly 5 years. Then again it failed. And then Syrian Scientific Association, it was established in 1857. And for the first time, they had a plan that they're not going to allow any foreigners. I mean, any foreigners, that means those who are non-Arabs. They are not allowing any non-Arabs to join this group. And this group, it is very interesting that this Syrian Scientific Association, it was only participated by the Arabs. So you see, this is it's a trick, that it is participated only by the Arabs. So the Arabs started promoting the Arabism. And only Arabs were the members of this association, and it accommodated all sects and promoted Arab nationalism. Now, and it manifested itself in the spreading of Western culture and education. Now, later on, after this success of this Syrian Scientific Association, in 1875, and this was you can see the most effective association, and it was established in 1875, and the name of this association was Secret Association, and it was established in Beirut. I told you that this was the most successful association, and it really worked to promote this idea of nationalism in the Arab world. Actually, it was based on political agenda and encouraged Arab nationalism and also Arabism. And it also created a kind of animosity, or you can say enmity, between the Arabs and the Turkish people. So because at that time it was under the rule of the Osmani Khilafah, so they said that this is not a Muslim Khilafah or Islamic state, they are Turkish and we are Arabs. So you see, very strategically and cleverly,